professional and financial growth. And the projects include support for victims of domestic violence or domestic abuse, empowering communities, personal and professional development, health and well-being, because aside from the online events, we also have face-to-face events in our locality of Warsaw in the West Midlands. So a fortnightly dance wellness class, DV craft fundraising sessions, the Let's Talk Happiness groups, and all these are anchored by volunteers, which I am. And I am pleased to be a volunteer, and so are the other volunteers who readily give of themselves for the cause, if you like. So that's a little bit about Drocella UK. This evening, before I start introducing our speakers, if I could ask everyone to put their mics on mute, and how it's going to run, the speakers in turn, after I introduce them, will take to the virtual stage. They will have 20 minutes to share. And then once all 4 speakers have spoken, I will open the floor for Q&A. So you have an opportunity, whether speaker to speaker asking questions or our audience asking questions of the speakers. We welcome it. So thank you for joining us this evening. And kicking us off this evening, I am so happy to introduce you to our first speaker, who is Nick Klingensmith, joining us from Florida in the USA. So a bit about
Carol.
Nick. Hi, let me introduce you. Nick Klingensmith, a 4-time cancer survivor, type 1 diabetic, recovering alcoholic and obstacle race competitor, transformed his life after a drunken episode in Las Vegas nearly cost him everything. Despite health challenges like herniated discs and sleep apnea, he completed over 100 Spartan races, marathons, and endurance events. Nick, a former sales professional, now empowers others to overcome fear and self-doubt, inspiring purposeful action towards success. As a raw, passionate storyteller, he draws on his personal struggles to deliver powerful speeches, showcasing the extraordinary potential of resilience and determination in overcoming adversity. Now, I am sure we haven't all missed all those medals behind you, Nick. And I'm sure each one tells a story. So I am going to hand it over to you to tell your story.
And thank you. And I'm actually going to just start with that right there, because everyone does have a story. I've been doing this for 8 years now, and there's over 100 Spartan races up there, 6 major marathons, 60, 70, there might even be 100 other obstacle course races, 5Ks, 10Ks, etc. But it's really important for anybody who sees this to understand that it always just started with one. And every single one since then has been a metaphor for overcoming some sort of a personal adversity, whether it be a physical ailment, a mental thing to overcome, emotional, or even a spiritual victory. And that's why I love talking about it, why I love the lifestyle, because it constantly forces me to be a better version of myself. And that's really what my story ultimately has been about. It started almost exactly 8 years ago today, where my boss walked into my office and said, "Nick, I want to do a Spartan race, and you're going to do it with me." And I looked up at him and I thought to myself, no, no, hell no. That seems awful. An 8 to 10 mile trail run with obstacles, that seemed absolutely miserable to me. I had no intention of making myself that uncomfortable. But I went home that night, and that's when I discovered the problem. I was sitting on the couch and it occurred to me, I already was uncomfortable. At that point in my life, I had everything going for me. I was 2 years sober. I was a VP of sales in a logistics industry. I had like 100 people working for me. We were crushing goals. I was dating a new girl that's my now wife. And I had just decisively beaten cancer for the 4th time. And that's when it occurred to me that I was suddenly just terrified of losing it all. I had overcome so much and achieved so much just to get there. And it was like now I was just so scared to have to move again. And I realized that I was stuck and I was just terrified of the uncertainty. And I needed a change. I didn't know what it was. And so I decided to just say yes to the race. It was 9 weeks away. And over the course of 9 weeks, a number of things started to happen. I made probably the most impactful change I had ever actually made in my life, other than when I got sober, was I set the alarm for 5:15 in the morning to train before work. And with that simple act of waking up to exercise, I woke up and I redefined that everything I had previously believed about myself. Now, I wish I could see a show of hands for anybody who would be watching here. And I would ask them, when was the last time anyone went outside and played without being afraid of getting your pants dirty? Because that's what a Spartan race was like to me. I'm going to go back in time for a minute because I hadn't realized up until this point in my life that I had let fear dominate such a portion of my life. In fact, it's not really even until now that I've been capable of admitting it. That I've been capable of admitting that the first time I was diagnosed with cancer, I was scared. I was standing in Foxwoods Casino in Connecticut when I got the call. Now, at that point in my life, all I knew about cancer was chemo and death. So hearing those words, you have cancer, was scary. But having to actually say them out loud to another person was terrifying. My boss had followed me out in the hallway and I could barely muster the strength. I was trying not to cry. I have cancer. And he instantly asked a whole bunch of questions I didn't know the answers to. And I knew I didn't want to talk about it. I drove home that night. I told a couple of my closest friends, but I really didn't want anyone to ask me questions. I didn't want to be a patient. I didn't want to feel like a victim. I didn't want anyone feeling sorry for me. And I was standing in my bathroom that night and I was looking in the mirror and it was dark. It was January in Massachusetts, so it was cold and bitter. And I looked in the mirror and I didn't like what I saw because staring back at me was a scared little kid, like red cheeks, puffy eyes, this helpless victim looking up and saying, God, why me? And I didn't like what I saw. And I got mad. And it took me a minute. It took me a minute to figure out what I wanted to say. And it was this: I am nobody's victim. I stood there for a minute and I stared back in the mirror again. I am nobody's victim. And I started to repeat it louder and louder, over and over. And this is like a 500 square foot apartment with like maybe 8 other apartments in this building. And when I started screaming at the top of my lungs, I am nobody's victim, I feel bad for my neighbor. But in that moment, I stopped being the scared little kid and I became defiant. And it was me versus cancer. And that's how I've taken the fight for the last 20 years. I picked a fight. I moved to Florida not long after that, and I played competitive beach volleyball for a period of time. And shortly after I moved here, I tore my shoulder pretty badly, and I had surgery, and then I got nerve damage as a result of that surgery. At the exact same time, I had been diagnosed with sleep apnea at 26 years old, and I've been adjusting to sleeping with a CPAP ever since. And right around that time, I started dropping weight. Now, just to give a little bit of perspective, you probably can't tell from here, but I'm about a buck 85 right now. I weigh 210 pounds. Less than 60 days later, I weighed 153. I went into the hospital and was admitted to the ICU with a blood sugar level over 800 and diagnosed as a type 1 diabetic. I processed it about the same way that I did cancer, by feeling sorry for myself at first. And I kept asking, why me? Why me? But then I asked a question that I really, really was going to regret asking, which is, haven't I had enough? Because just a few months later, I was diagnosed with cancer for the second time. This time was different, though. I was exhausted. I mean, that was a lot. That was a lot in a 2-year period of time. And so I went from saying I'm nobody's victim to kind of starting to feel like a victim. Now, the surgery treatment was the same, and I began to move on with my life. And that's when my 25-year-old sister killed herself. Now, that's a whole other story by itself. But when I was diagnosed with diabetes, I stopped drinking because after I felt sorry for myself, I was determined to manage it. When my sister died, I started drinking again. It wasn't long until the drink took me, and alcohol took over, and I was a slave to alcohol. And it was hard for me to know because I wasn't a daily drinker. I didn't drink every day. I didn't get drunk every time I drank, and bad things didn't happen every time I got drunk. But more and more, the bad nights were outnumbering the good. The selfish decisions were taking over, and all of my decisions were ruled by alcohol. It actually came to a point where I finally decided I was going to quit drinking because I was tired of other people talking about me. Well, you can only imagine how successful that was. It was the most miserable several months of my life. I white knuckled it every day and I tempted fate. I went to happy hour. I bought rounds for people. I put myself in these stupid situations to try to exert control. And then the best thing happened to me. I got diagnosed with cancer for the third time. Only this time was different because it was inoperable, or at least that's the word I chose to use. It's pressed up against my vocal cords and it was unsafe to operate. So what did I do? I said, well, there's nothing left for me to do but drink. Who's going to mess with me? I have inoperable cancer. Now, spoiler alert, I still have that tumor. It's been over 10 years. This has a happy ending, but it didn't matter. I crawled deep into a bottle because that's where I wanted to be. And I came up lucid on a Las Vegas hotel, getting thrown out for trying to have sex with a hooker in a broom closet while my girlfriend slept down the hallway. Oh, and I was supposed to be a speaker at the conference the next day. Somehow or another, we found another hotel room that night. And when my head hit the pillow and I had this moment of lucidity and I said, I don't want to live this way anymore. And I went home that next day and I started a program of sobriety. And it's actually been 10 years and 3 months since then. And those next 2 years were amazing. The first year, it was about cleaning up the wreckage of my past. But then a year after I got sober, my mom died at 62 years old. Now, there's a whole other story about me and my mommy issues. You can check that out in the book. But the thing you need to understand is this: if I was still drinking when she died, I probably would have drank until I died. So when I told you that getting cancer for the third time was the best thing that happened to me, getting cancer saved my life. And then I got it again. Fourth time, 2016, right in the back of my head, something completely different. Now you have to understand something. I was 2 years sober at this point. I had never been sober when I got cancer before. So I didn't know what all these feelings were. All I ever had was anger and, fear disguised as anger. So all of a sudden I was processing all this stuff and I felt so sorry for myself. And I kept saying, you can only get cancer so many times and not die. On the way to work, I would tell myself this has got to be it. You can only get cancer so many times and not die. The surgery was so simple. They took it out of the back of my head. It was very surface level. There was no chemo, no radiation, no additional treatment after that. And I got the first all clear I had ever gotten in my life. And the lesson I learned, I remember leaving Moffitt Cancer Center that day, driving back to work. And I was happy. I was pretty excited. I mean, to get a victory over cancer is ooh. But I just couldn't stand how I had wasted those 2 months feeling so sorry for myself and focused on a terrible ending that wasn't going to happen. I didn't know what to do with myself and I was lost. And that's about the time my boss walked into my office and introduced me to Spartan Race. My first race experience was liberating because I had literally built this bubble around myself filled with self-doubt, convinced I couldn't run because of my knees, because of my diabetes. I couldn't do things because of my sleep apnea. I held myself back. And when I did my first race out there in the world, getting muddy, gritty, badass, not me against the world, but just me in the world. And I felt liberated. And I thought, if everything else that I had previously believed about myself was incorrect, like what else can I discover about myself? And I wanted more. And good habits are a gateway drug because what started out as working out early in the morning led to me having a regular bedtime for the first time in my adult life, which led to me having better eating habits, drinking habits. I started doing yoga. I started meditating. I was progressing in mind, body, and spirit. And I was even seeing this in my interaction with other people. For the first time in my life, I liked who I saw in the mirror. And then it hit me from behind. I was sitting at a red light and I got hit by a woman going full speed. Her car went boom, flipped over like something in the movies. Boom, 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 boom. My Jeep got screwed up, never rode right again. I got several more herniated discs, nerve damage. That night, my cat of 12 years died. 10 days later, the lady who hit me died. And although all I was doing was sitting at a red light, I felt responsible. And I had felt like everything I had just done and progressed in my life wasn't real. And I felt like the bottom fall beneath me. And I wanted to give up. I just didn't know what it meant. I mean, you keep going to work, you keep taking showers, you keep buying food. And so I put another race on the calendar, but I was having a hard time getting into it. And I was listening to this motivational speaker on YouTube, and he was going back and forth about, are you a victim or survivor? Victim or survivor? And I didn't see the difference. And that's when I had realized that no matter what anyone had told me up until that point, I had not overcome any of my adversity. I had only survived it. I was still playing the victim. The only way I could abandon the victim mindset was deciding not to be a victim anymore. And in that moment, I threw a glorified temper tantrum and I said, I am going to do shit that diabetics should not. I am going to live every day to spit in the face of cancer. I am going to help other alcoholics get sober because that's how I recover. I will not be defined by my adversity, but rather my triumph over it. That next year, I ran 27 races, including the Boston and Chicago Marathon. I raised $25,000 for charity. I proposed to my wife in front of the King Leonidas statue in Sparta. And ultimately, I wrote the book Through the Fire that shares a lot of these lessons and really is now just my origin story because now as a speaker, I share stories about getting out of that victim mindset and how we overcome it. And the way that I overcome it now, the way that I can thrive is by helping others, by taking what I've gone through to help others. The only way that I fight back against cancer is, I mean, two things. I race with fuck cancer written across my chest when I race. And number two, I'm currently fundraising for the American Cancer Society. And that's how I find purpose and that's how we overcome. Take what we have gone through to help others. And I think I'm up on time just about. So I'll just say this. Live inspired is what this shirt says. It's the greatest lesson I've been able to learn from what I've gone through because at the end of the day, you have to accept your starting line. Accepting that I am a diabetic does not limit me. Accepting that I am a diabetic gives me the foundation for how I can live my life. I can do anything that anyone else can. And I prove this constantly. I just climbed a mountain a month ago just because I can. We may have further to go to get to that starting line, but there's nothing that holds us back besides our mind. And I prove this time and time again. And inspiration is everywhere. You just have to look for it. It's not easy when you're in it. It is not easy when you feel that life is coming at you, but that's just a season. If we keep moving forward, we can find the inspiration in others. Inspire yourself. Just take small steps, small progress, and challenge the things that hold us back. Challenge these circumstances because I guarantee you, every single thing that you feel is limiting you about your life right now exists solely in your mind. Take the first step and be willing to find out. Let's go live inspired.
Oh my goodness, talk about kicking us off, Nick. Whoa. Oh my word. I'm still getting over everything you've shared, what you've been through. One person. Resilience with a capital R. Thank you. Thank you for sharing with us. And do put the link in the chat for your book.
Actually, if you don't mind,
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to share a link
You've
in
got
the
3 minutes.
chat.
You've got 3 minutes left.
Perfect. I'm going to share a link in the chat to my fundraising page for the American Cancer Society.
Okay.
I'm fundraising in the support against in the fight against breast cancer, and I would much rather any attention go there. I mean, I can do both, but
Yes, you can. You
all
can.
right, then we'll do that.
Because you know what? People suffer and go through what you go through in terms of cancer, diabetes, and I love what you shared. I am not a victim. I am not a victim. Repeating that to yourself.
It does
Yeah.
start with the self-talk. It starts
Yes.
with the fighting back, and we do define ourselves. Remember when you're a kid and we defined ourselves however we wanted, not by the circumstances, not we faced, not by the titles or our jobs, just whatever vision we saw of ourselves. Well, I don't see why that has to be different. In a speech I'm
Mhm.
giving in 2 weeks to a group of salespeople, I'm talking to them about how we need to stop identifying ourselves with our jobs, but rather with our, the things that fuel us. So don't be a salesperson who golfs, be a golfer who sells. The things that fire us up. Like that's why even before I went off as a speaker, this was my background in logistics because this is what I want to talk about. This is where my passion is, and stuff like that. So, um, yeah, and there was a thought I had and I lost it, but that's all right.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Have a look at the comments in the chat, Nick. When
Um,
yeah.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you very much.
And I know Selena's story. That is the last comment. I am familiar with Selena's story, who has had to overcome cancer as well. So, well, ladies and gentlemen, what can I say? Absolutely. Thank you, Nick. So I'd now like to introduce you to our second speaker of, well, in my case, the second speaker of the evening, as I'm in the UK. But our next speaker is joining us from Tennessee, USA, and she is Drocella Mugorewera. And I hope awesome. Now, Drocella is the founder of the Diversity in Action global movement, transforms workplaces into environments where employees feel valued and motivated. A former Rwandan parliament member, she uses her leadership experience to help employers reduce turnover, save money, and create dedicated brand ambassadors. Her results-driven strategies enhance employee engagement and retention, fostering sustainable success. A #1 best-selling author and international speaker, Drocella is also a devoted wife, mother, grandparent, and respected community leader. When not championing inclusive leadership, she enjoys time with family, especially her grandchildren, and finds peace in nature's beauty. Now, Drocella, I could say from one beauty to the next, to the other. So I open the floor to you.
Thank you, Carol. Albert Einstein said, I quote, "The important thing is not to stop questioning. Curiosity has its own reason for existing." Have you ever questioned why there are millions of refugees and displaced population around the world? Have you ever questioned why that is happening and who has the key to stop the refugee crisis? Before I continue, I want to thank you, Carol and Rita, for creating this platform and giving us a voice, because at one time my voice was shut down completely for almost 9 months. I remember like it was yesterday. It was July 17 of 2008 when I was forced to leave everything in my home country, Rwanda, because of oppression and persecution. Some of you are parents. I left behind my daughter who was 12 years old, her siblings, my husband, my family, and everything I invested in for more than 40 years. My life was in the hands of two strange men who could have raped me or killed me. I didn't talk to my family for almost a year. And I didn't see my children for 2 years. I was angry, disoriented, frustrated, and I could not sleep for 2 nights when I decided to become a refugee. After surviving the genocide, 1994, genocide against Tutsi, and becoming a refugee to the Democratic Republic of Congo, I thought that was enough. I didn't know that I would become a refugee again twice. And I'm thankful and grateful that America gave me a refuge and facilitated the family unification after 2 years. In this conversation, and I want to be it a dialogue, I do not want to be it a monologue. If you have an aha, write in the chat. If you have a question, put it in the chat. You will hear about my refugee journey. How did I get here? And then the lesson learned, how it can apply to your life, your listeners or your family members or your community. And then now, how do I give forward to the humanity? When I came to America in 2009, and I tell you, I didn't have a direction, but I went to United Nations High Commission of Refugees, and I got the refugee status, and then I started to see where they can resettle me. America was not my first choice because I didn't have any friend. I didn't have any person there, but I did trust the process and what the case manager was telling me. I said, I don't have a choice. Send me where I can be safe. Arriving in America, of course, through U.S. refugee program, I had case managers and a member of Northside Christian Church to come to welcome me. And I felt hope because during the whole journey, it was like the fear. I didn't know what to expect without having a friend or a family to rely on, just trusting God to keep me safe. So then the bed was made, there was food in the refrigerator. And I remember I'm a Christian, I'm Catholic. And it was hard for me to miss Sunday Mass unless I was sick. So you can imagine I did spend all those 9 months without communion. Just I was talking to God. My daily routine was waking up, praying, taking shower, and then eating. Pray, shower, eating. That was my daily routine. Fortunately, when I came to America and didn't have any friend, my first ask, of course, was connect me to the church. And this is how I started to create a new family. I didn't have a car, but there was a bus for the church. And then I was riding and calling the parish to come to pick me up on Sunday to go to church. That I started to get involved that time because there were other international refugees and immigrants in the area who didn't speak well English, and I was helping, and then I was helping seniors to call them, and they'll tell them when the church will come to pick them up. So the refugee resettlement agent normally help you to find a job. So the first job they found for me, I was a member of parliament, I was a consultant, I was a member of the government. I was assuming that if they find a job, they'll find something closer. What they found didn't match my qualification and my expertise. It was just $6.55 an hour. I say, well, I'll take it. And then I'm over $8 an hour, $12 an hour. And then in 2015, the agency that welcomed me in 2009 was looking for an executive. I said, I have a story to tell as a refugee. I understand the struggles of refugees locally and abroad. But before then, I did more than 100 applications. Have you ever been told that you are overqualified? That was what they were telling me all the time. And I cannot even tell you how they told me not to write on my resume my experience so I can sell myself cheap and I can find low-paying jobs. But I didn't have any option. I did what the case manager told me. And then I remember also like contacting people I knew before and they ignored me. And I said, why? When you are like a government official, you are treated like a queen or king and you work on the red carpet. But when you become a refugee, you are treated like a second-class person. So all that situation didn't stop me. I said, I have to be strong and build the muscles so one day I can welcome my family. Because I didn't know if it will happen, what I did was just to surrender my family to God and to tell him, please alleviate all the obstacles and notes so I can be reunited one time with my family. So that happened. So my husband came, he applied for an asylum after I arrived in US. And then 2 years after, thankfully, my children came. But they did miss one academic year when they are processing, doing the screening to come to join me. For people who are saying that refugees are just coming, I want to tell you, the process is tough. Even me, when I was traveling on diplomatic passport, when I became a refugee, I had to go through the same screening process like other refugees. So, and for the leaders who are saying that they don't know how they come, there is a process they go through from United Nations High Commission of Refugees, and then the embassy and the FBI and other agencies are involved for that screening and background. So those children, when they were abroad, asking, Mommy, when are we coming? Which school will we go to? I said, just pray for the family reunification. I understand there are good schools in America. And then back home, I was putting them in the Christian school. And they want them to do the same when they arrive here because I didn't know how the public school were. And sometimes they were talking about the guns and things in schools. And I said, oh, I was scared to put my children there. So we trust in God. I did talk to my priest, and they said the Catholic charities, maybe these are the ones you can go to talk to, so you can put the children in a Catholic school. And they told me they cannot push them away because of not being able to pay the fees. So because there was no bus there, so they did give us the scholarship for the 5 children to go to graduate there. And then I paid some money and then was in charge of transportation. So now those children are independent professionals in accounting, nursing, transportation, and then human resources. So I say this not to brag, but to tell people who are saying that refugees are a burden. Refugees are a blessing. They are bringing to our communities social, cultural, and economic values to our nation. So if I consider how much the government paid on us and what we give forward, all of us combined, and we did pay back the travel loan because through the refugee program, we have to have a travel loan you have to pay. So if I had to pay for 5 children to come, I would not have money to bring them. But I'm thankful that through International Organization for Migration, travel loan, they did come and they joined me. So for people who are against refugees and immigrants, they have to think about what are the contributions they are bringing to our communities, because it's huge. So what are the lessons I did learn from this refugee journey up to date? Lesson number one is standing in your faith and surrender your difficulties to the superpower. You can call it God, you can call it universe, or whoever you think it's the superpower for you. And then the second lesson learned is making your superpower, one of your superpowers, building relationship and networking. Because when I started from scratch without a family member or any friends, I did network like a ninja. I wanted to go to the church and know about people. And a friend of mine, Sue Carney, taught me about network marketing. And I started to go into the communities, volunteering. And then I started to build my network, as well as sharing my story so people can know about me and support me the best. And even when I didn't have my family with me, so some will tap on me and say, we are with you. We are praying for family reunification. You need support in your life. If you are alone, and I know loneliness is killing people in America, but worldwide, I think. So this is how making that as a superpower to network and build new relationships is key. And the third tip I can give you is finding a mentor or a coach, because I wouldn't be not where I am today if I didn't have good mentors and coaches. And through the relationships, I became an author. So I wrote a chapter in this book, Leaders with a Heart. And one of the things talking about standing in faith, I wrote something about the power of forgiveness. Because some people, and I can quickly read what is in here, I have also been asked, after all the challenges I have faced, I get the force to keep moving, staying energized, and create. I publicly forgave all the people who contributed consciously and unconsciously to my persecution. Negativity is my enemy. The oppression did not happen to me. It did happen for me. I focused more on a good thing that came out of it. So, and I want to say that the title of my chapter is I'm no longer a victim. I am a creator. So, Nick, we are not victims, And this chapter I wrote because I met somebody who was a refugee from Afghanistan who has a podcast, Leaders with a Heart. And then I wrote another chapter in this book with Grace and Grit, inspirational guideposts for women in business. And the title of this chapter is Challenging the Status Quo. I did ask my children, how would they describe me? And my son said, Mama, you challenge the status quo. You never leave something you find. You have to add value. And if you have to speak out, you do speak out. So, and then in this second book, I can share you one tip I wrote in here. When I was a politician, hiding behind a smile, pausing and praying was my go-to calming strategy that helps me to get unstuck and give a voice to my ideas. Test that pausing and praying strategy and asking your future self to guide you in difficult moments of expressing your voice and ideas. So, as I said, I am no longer a victim. I'm a creator. I am an author. So now let me share what I created and what I am passionate about today. And give me a second. Can you see my slide? The diversity in action system. So I created this system to help companies eliminate employee turnover and increase revenues up to 50% by turning their employees into loyal ambassadors of their brand. Last year, I read that 900 billion dollars were attached to employee turnover. And this employee turnover is affecting our families, it is affecting businesses. So I want to help them by helping companies creating their own diversity in action system that has 5 pillars where you declare your commitment to diversity, you define your goals and metrics, you dedicate enough resources to the program, you develop a training plan for your employees, and then you deliver results and celebrate your team members. And one of the things also I want to help companies is to create welcoming environment, because welcoming means different thing for different companies. And then helping them to build trust on their teams, embedding storytelling in their culture, and then building unity among the team, because we have a lot of division and biases we have to tackle. We have to learn and unlearn things from the past. And then we have to create wealth. How do companies create wealth? And then they give it back to the communities they serve. So this diversity in action system, as I said, I was listening and hearing the complaints about not finding employees, retaining them, making them come back. And as it is affecting us, I say, how can I give forward to my community, but also to the whole world? Because employee turnover and employee retention challenges are global. So I am now a global consultant. So even if I was forced to flee my country, now I have a bigger voice that can reach the whole world, not just one community or one country. And I'm grateful for this. And I'm grateful for all the volunteers, all the people who contributed to my stability and me being thriving. And then my legacy project is to help. In America, many people learn language and that they don't use it, second language or third language. So working and teaching in one language is no longer sufficient. So my legacy project is to help students learn different languages for life, for businesses, for service, not just, and there is another chapter coming up in the parenting manuals. So it will be coming soon. And I wanted to thank you for this opportunity to share my story and my aspirations. And I want to stay in touch with everyone. I want to ask you, everybody of you, speak out when you see injustice happening and hold your leaders accountable. I was asking at the beginning, who do you think has a key to stop the refugee crisis? Empathetic leaders do. And as parents, I think we are tired. We are sick and tired to see our children dying in those wars and violence. So I invite you to stay in touch, and I will put my information in the chat. Again, thank you for listening.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you, Drocella. Wow. Thank you. Okay, please hold your questions till after all 4 speakers have spoken. That would be fantastic. Nick, I hope your pooch is still okay. Yeah, awesome. Okay, so it gives me great pleasure as we continue in this inspiring stories from both sides. Thank you, Nick, first of all, and then Drocella, we've just heard from. And now it gives me great pleasure to introduce you to Elisa Bogart, joining us from Vancouver, Canada. And Elisa is a launch strategist and planner. She helps coaches strategize, plan, and execute their program launches in a structured and organized way so they can focus on scaling their business. She has a combined 17 years of project management and coaching experience that she uses to get her clients ready to launch. And as you launch into your story, Elisa, I turn the floor over to you.
Thank you so much, Carol. Thank you for inviting me and having here, and all the amazing stories we've heard so far. They're so incredibly inspiring and really about resilience, right? And it's quite the topic, resilience. And I know that, yes, I am a launch planner. I would love to share sort of this story, my story of resilience as I've eventually come to where I am today. Because I really feel it throughout my life. It's my resiliency has really been a key to my success of living the life that I want. And I think it's also been the same with the people that we've heard today. And I really want to share some of my stories of being resilient and how they shaped me, and how you can apply it, to your life and to your business. So, I grew up with a series of sort of repetitive micro traumas, the small T's. And then when I was 18 years old, my dad died, and he died right in front of me, which really was a huge, huge impact on my life. And at the time, I was in a mentally abusive relationship. I had some toxic friends, and I had started college, but I had no idea what I wanted to do. And my grades from high school, they weren't that great because I didn't really care about school when I was in high school. So I couldn't take the classes that I want. That really bit me when I got to college. And when my dad died, I really wanted to have this mindset of really to live life to the fullest, because you just never know when it's going to end, because he was only 46 when he died. And at the time, the only way that I knew how to do that, to be resilient and to against my childhood and him dying, was really to tick the boxes of life, to do the things that I was told that I needed to do to have, the proper life of an adult. So for the next 5 years, I got a job. I got a good job. I bought an apartment. I got a brand new car, and I'd broken up with my boyfriend. He obviously wasn't good husband material, because that's what was next on the list. But the truth is that I wasn't happy. I mean, life was good, right? I didn't really have anything to complain about, but I really wanted to go traveling, and I wanted to explore the world. And like many of you, I'm sure I was doing the daily grind. Same thing, day in, day out. And I really just couldn't help but think, was this it? What about all the things that I wanted to do? But I wasn't sure that I was resilient enough to change my entire life. And so the first time I gave myself permission to go after what I wanted was back in 2003. And I'm sitting in the living room of my friend Danielle's apartment, and it was her birthday party, and she had just gotten back from a backpacking trip. And she brings out her photo album, and I noticed that my heart sinks a little bit. I was really excited to see the pictures and hear all about the trip, but I was a little bit jealous. And jealousy is an interesting emotion, isn't it? It really kind of tells you that something's a bit off, because going backpacking was something that I wanted to do for years and I never had. And at the time I thought, there's no way that I could go, right? I got too much responsibility. I had a full-time job. I had a mortgage. I just bought this car. And after, in the party, after finishing of oohing and awing all the amazing pictures and listening to her stories, another friend of mine, Michelle, said that, excuse me, said that she was going backpacking the next year. And I was immediately excited by this. And so I go up to her and I ask her about the trip. And it sounded absolutely amazing. She was going to go to Australia, New Zealand, and Fiji. How cool would that be? So I built up the courage and I asked if I could join her. And she was very casual about it. She's like, yeah, sure. Let's talk about it over coffee next week. So after the party, I go home. I'm sitting at home and I decide, I needed to give myself some real talk. And I say to myself, Elisa, you have been such a good girl. You're doing all the right things. Your family is so proud of you. Look at all that you've accomplished, and you're only 23. You really deserve happiness, and you're not happy. So really give yourself permission to do what you want to do. And after my dad dying, you know that life is short, and you said you wanted to live it to the fullest. So stop waiting for someone else to tell you that it's okay. Now's your time to make this life-defining choice. This amazing opportunity is literally falling on your lap. So just go after it. So the next week I meet Michelle for coffee and I make a commitment to her. We're like, okay, we're going to go. And she had already booked her flight. So I go home that night and I booked my flights too. I just like ripped the Band-Aid off and, hitting that book now button, which is, it gave me this incredible surge of joy. And it was just an amazing feeling. And I gave a vow to myself then. And I was like, I'm going to remember this feeling anytime that anything or anyone, including myself, gets in the way of going. So I made a 6-month plan and I packed up my whole life and I went. And to date, I have traveled 53 countries. And so making that choice to travel has really defined so much of my life. And I'm just so glad that I made it. But, backpacking on my own and traveling so many countries and living abroad really required a lot of resilience. And it was very challenging. And one of the challenges that I gave myself was to live in London, England. And it was a bit of a rough start, I have to say. Prior to living in London, I had been backpacking for 7 months. So it's kind of like between countries. So I go backpacking, doing it on a shoestring. And I didn't have that much money left when I arrived in London, which for those of you who've been there or live there or in England, know that it's an expensive, huge city. And I had traveled with my boyfriend, but we broke up within 2 weeks of moving to London. I really kind of believe that we probably should have broken up before the trip started, but that was also a mentally abusive relationship, and I was heartbroken. And because of it being mentally abusive, I really had little sense of self. And we were staying at his brother's place when we had, moved to London together. And so now I have to leave, right? We're broken up. So now I'm homeless. And, I've got my backpack and my 2 suitcases in London. Like, where am I going to go? And I didn't really know anyone. I didn't have a job yet. I just felt like I was a complete puddle of mush. And this was the first time that I felt the weight of depression. I thought that maybe, I wasn't going to make it in London. I thought maybe I was going to fail and have to move back home to my parents' house. Now I'm like 30 years old. So I was like, oh, I can't go home. I can't be defeated and go back and live with my parents, until I get on my feet. Like, that thought was just even more depressing. And I remember a friend had asked me, we had met actually on that backpacking trip, and she moved to London after I'd gotten there. And we were out for having a cup of tea in this cute tea house. And she asked me what I wanted out of my life there. And I was like, what do I want? I was completely stumped by that question. I wasn't even sure who I was anymore. And I hadn't been asked that question in years. Like, my life up until then wasn't really about, or the last couple of years wasn't about what I wanted. And I knew that I didn't want to feel stuck anymore or miserable anymore. That was for sure. And this question is really what lifted me out of my low state that I was in. It gave me this freedom to think for myself. And I started to really evaluate my life, every part of it. Like, what did I want? Who did I want to be? How did I want to show up in this world? And I went on a 2-year journey to figure this out and really rebuilt my life from the ground up. I transformed my life. I transformed my mindset. I transformed my perspective. And, I had to learn a lot of things the hard way. I didn't get a coach. I didn't get a mentor. I was in London on my own, and I was also raised with the shame of getting help. I was raised being told, figure it out on your own. So I did. I stumbled through it all on my own, and it took a long time. It took a long time to learn how to love myself and to speak my truth. And I had to sort of rediscover what my values were, is like who I was today and who I wanted to be. And I knew I had to start living to them so I could be that person that I wanted to be, to really be my authentic self, not like the multitude of personas and roles that I've been playing my entire life. And this took courage, and I really wish that I had a support system to, that I could share my struggles with. And I really learned the hard way how to break through challenges. There was a lot of ups and downs, and, but I did find my confidence again through being resilient. I was able to do that. I found happiness, and I really made my life the way that I wanted it, which was pretty awesome. And now, like 13 years later, I've got money in the bank, I've got healthy, conscious relationships, I have a home that I love, and I'm living my passion with my business. My life isn't perfect by any means, 100% not. Continually learning and growing and navigating the ups and downs of life and being a solopreneur. And during that journey, one of the things that I did know that I wanted was to get into project management. I had started on this path a little bit before moving to London, before I even went traveling. And so I signed up for a course in England called Prince 2. And it's kind of like this methodology that everyone had there. So I had to, get it if I wanted to get a job. And I sat beside a man in the class and told him how I had just moved to London. I was finding it really difficult. And he told me that London, he's like, it will beat you down. It will swallow you whole. So many people do not survive the first 6 months in London when they move there. He's like, you need to push through it. You need to fight back. Then it will be amazing. And it was. This really ignited that inner resilience that I have. And it gave me hope because I knew that I have been resilient in any challenge that I've had in my life that I have faced before. So I became a project manager, and I was in the industry for 13 or 14 years. And I've had all sorts of different roles. I was a business analyst, a PMO analyst, portfolio manager, and of course, a project manager. And I worked my way up from being like an assistant project manager to being a staff technical program manager. And I was also introduced to coaching when I lived in London, which is also where I got my first project manager job. And I had the opportunity to do some volunteer career coaching, which was pretty awesome, like getting people back into working. And so it always kind of been in the back of my mind of something that I wanted to pursue one day, but my project management career was taking off. So I decided to focus on that. But the career coaching that I had gotten over the years really helped me like catapult my project management career, even through adversity. So working in large corporations, like I worked for some Fortune 100 and 500 companies, really big companies. And especially in the early stages of my project management career, I often found myself being the only woman on the team, especially in the tech industry, which, some companies can be quite male dominated. And I remember being in a meeting once and I looked around the room and I realized I was like, wow, I think I make up their entire diversity quota. And I'm sure there's people in the room here who felt that same way. I was the only woman. This was in London. So technically I was foreign, I wasn't from England. I have a mixed background, and both my parents are immigrants to Canada, and I was in my 30s. So I covered that demographic too. And I was able to find ways to not being intimidated by that, to maintain my self-confidence and in my experience, and in my skills, and really to be resilient in the face of adversity. And I remember during a meeting once, I was working in tech and I was working with a team of engineers, software engineers. And one of them was giving me an update on the issue that he was working on. And I was like, hey, could you give me an update on that within the next 45 minutes? Because I got a meeting with our senior management. I need to give them a status update. And then another engineer in the little meeting that we were having actually yelled at me because I was talking. And he yelled, stop talking. Like actually said that to me, put his hand up. And, he's like, project managers are only here to listen and not talk. And I was really shocked by this because often in meetings with the other teams that I was working with, I'd ask clarifying questions. And if they had blockers or whatever, I would reiterate priorities. Like that was my role there. And so, I really doubted myself and questioned my own responsibilities. I was like, wait, have I been doing this wrong the whole time? And I know, I know now that, our feelings are these amazing pieces of information, right? That we can use to get clarity. So, I would love to give you some little tips right now of some coaching questions that I really wish that I had back then that you can ask yourself to help with your resiliency and learning in both life and business. So the first question I like to ask is, what is presupposed or believed to be true here? So in my case, I would think of what's the doubt? which for me was that I had, maybe I had no idea what I was doing. I didn't know my own job. I don't belong. He knows my job better than me. I'm not good enough. Right. So that was presupposed to be true or believed. And then the second question is, what is the positive intention of this experience? So I could have asked, maybe the engineer that I was working with on the issue, maybe I could have asked him the questions about it after the meeting. Or perhaps I was spending too much time on this one particular issue. So, I could be more mindful about that. Maybe I could think of a really good question to ask as opposed to several different questions. So these are some positive intentions maybe I could take away. And the third and final question is, what else is true about you and your abilities? And so for me in this situation, I would be like that. I know my job. I am allowed to speak in meetings. I can learn from this experience. I am actually really good at my job. I do belong here. I am valuable. And I know that my other teams love me. So these are just some things that can really help you sort of move through something whenever you're faced with them. I can copy and paste them in the chat after I finish my talk here, if you wanted to take them away. But yeah, I was really good at being a project manager, but I knew that project management it didn't feel perfectly aligned for me. And when COVID hit, I had the time to really think about that misalignment. I mean, I think many of us had a lot of time to think about many things. And I remember how much I loved coaching when I was back in London, like how it just ignited and sparked this thing in me. So over the last 4 years or so, I've gotten 4 different coaching certifications. And I started out as a confidence coach. And I have this year decided to use my project management skills, really combined with my confidence coaching, to keep coaches on track, by being their launch strategist and planner. Because I'm a super organized person. I'm an organized planner person. I project manage everything. And, even my friends pointed out whenever we're planning anything together, I'm always the one to organize everything. This type of stuff just kind of comes easy to me, and I enjoy it. So, but when I think about when I first became a coach as a confidence coach and got my first certification, it was like, okay, I gotta start coaching. I very much hid. I didn't make myself visible. I didn't like selling. I was very much stuck in perfectionism. And I spent a year perfecting all my signature things, my signature system, my signature program, my signature doc. And I didn't really let anybody know how they could work with me. And then when I finally did my first launch, launched my first program, I understood really just how difficult it was to get all of this stuff done. It was like this giant puzzle with all of these little tiny pieces. And it took me a while to figure out how to make them all fit, right? I definitely messed up. I definitely made mistakes. I forgot things. Some people got no emails. Some people got the wrong emails. I know people got emails at midnight instead of at noon, things like that. And I also didn't have anyone show up to my first workshop. And I don't know if anyone's had that, if there's any coaches in the room, but no one showed up to my event. And I know that's actually happened to many of us. And all I knew was at the end of my first launch was that I didn't make any money. I didn't get to help anyone. I had this amazing program and no one was benefiting from it. And I see this with coaches who are my friends, coaches I've been in the same programs with. So with my own launches, I didn't want to make the same mistakes again. So I used my falter to improve my processes. And as a result, I've had better conversions on all levels. And this is really what led me to be the launch strategist and planner that I am today. So I'm all about systems and plans and processes. And I really used my project management skills and coaching experience, and some mindfulness tools as well is definitely a huge part of it to help coaches launch their programs with really less stress and to be less overwhelmed. And so I really like to share my superpower with the people I love working with the most, which is coaches. And so since starting my business, I've been featured in magazines and I've spoken internationally. I've launched my own programs, my gift giveaways, summits, book, and most recently my podcast, which I think I would love some people in this room to be on my podcast. And trust me, I've meticulously planned and managed all of them, of course. So if you're struggling with getting your amazing coaching program out into the world, I'd love to invite you to a call with me so we can discuss your launch, what's holding you back, and starting putting together a launch strategy for you to help you be resilient in the face of the many, many challenges and self-doubt that we face as solopreneurs. So I'll put a link in the chat to book a call with me, and also to my website. Thank you very much.
Oh, Elisa, that was wonderful. Thank you. Absolutely, thank you.
Thanks for having me. It's an honor to be here.
Thank you for saying yes. Awesome. Yes, do put your links in the chat, Elisa. And I know there's some here who will jump at the opportunity to be on your podcast. So yes, awesome.
Yes, I'll definitely do that.
Wow, what an evening so far, or afternoon, wherever you're joining us from. And I'm excited to introduce you to our next speaker, Jazz Singh. I met Jazz because Jazz is joining us. Well, he lives in London, but currently on holiday in Tenerife. Look at the difference in our outfits, Jazz. This is London weather. This is Tenerife weather. Awesome. But I met Jazz at a networking event in Birmingham, close to where I am. But more about Jazz, less about me. So, who is Jazz Singh? Well, Jazz's journey is a powerful testament to resilience and personal transformation. Growing up in East London, he faced severe childhood trauma from domestic abuse and racism. Despite these challenges, Jazz overcame addiction and even homelessness through sheer determination. A pivotal moment came during a dark period in prison, where he discovered inner strength and resilience. Through introspection, he reshaped his mental pathways, finding joy and purpose despite adversity. His story inspires others to triumph over hardship and embrace personal growth, demonstrating the strength of the human spirit. There's a thread running through all of this evening. Jazz, firstly, thank you for honoring your commitment, even though you're on holiday, to speak on this podcast. Thank you.
Let me dispel the first thing. I'm not on holiday. I'm actually here on a work engagement, but I still wanted to honour my commitment to you, because sticking by your word is one of my founding pillars. I'm going to read the message on my cap, if I may. It says, "Hey stranger, you're one positive thought away from a miracle. With love, a stranger." That's how we're all connected. We're all humans and we're beings, yeah? And my journey started in 1971. There is overlaps with Nick's story, with Elisa's story and Drocella's story, despite not knowing them at all. But trauma has a way of interweaving itself into all of our lives in various different disguises. And what's traumatic to one person could be light for the other, and what could be light for the other could be traumatic for the other person. So we should never have a trauma scale. Trauma is just traumatic. It's how we internalize it. I started in 1971. That's the year I was born, in East London. Anybody knows East London? It's very sexy, very cool. Now it's very hip and bougie. When I grew up, it was a slum, yeah, and it was pretty brutal place for a person of Indian heritage to be born into. And I was raised by a father who suffered a lot of adverse childhood experiences because he grew up in partition in India, which is a very traumatic time for a child to grow up. And our family lost a lot in partition. So we had a lot of land in Lahore, which was the capital of Punjab. And when we got transferred to India, we were given a tent. And that had a huge impact on my father, to the point where he used to communicate with his fists. And the streets I grew up in, people used to use my head as a football. And we had a lot of races, petrol bombs. We had, people spraying Pacquiao, F off back to your own country. And I wouldn't move much because I was normally standing in it. And, I wish you could learn to speak English. This is my mother tongue. I had to learn my heritage languages. But school was a very safe space for me, and I thrived at school, and I successfully managed to navigate and get myself a law degree in 1993. And those that are good at maths might recognize that I should be around 53, which I will be later this month. But I got my law degree, and I wanted to be a human rights lawyer. And the reason why I wanted to be a human rights lawyer is Stephen Lawrence passed away tragically in my final year in 1993. And because of that, I wanted to go and do something in the human rights world. I went to bar school, and I was told in no uncertain terms I wouldn't make it in law because I was 5'0" in height. I'm 5'8" with my cap on. I didn't speak the Queen's English, and I was a lot more, all right, mate, you good fella, back then, but I could learn to speak more eloquently. But the third one was the kicker. They said, and you're also brown. And that crushed me. That crushed me as a human, because for 22 brutal years, I climbed this education ladder to get a degree. I studied it for 3 years. So I went to my beloved mum. I said, Mum, here's my degree. It took me 3 years to study it. I also wanted to travel the world. This is pre the internet, pre Google Earth. So you had to carry 2 books and a rucksack, The Lonely Guide and The Rough Planet. For those that are old enough to remember, you'd go and travel the world. And I traveled from Canada to Chile, in the Americas. I lived in Australia for a year to recharge my money. And there I worked for a stockbroker along my journey. I was one of those weird people that took a soup and cufflinks in the back of my rucksack because I thought one day I might need to get a job. And then I came in through Japan, Southeast Asia, and ran up through India, came back to England. In 1999, when I returned, people were still chanting, F off back to your own country. You don't belong here. I got my revenge. I started a career in wealth management and in banking. And on paper, my life looked amazing. I was a kid from the ends with nothing, and I became a very successful banker and wealth manager. But nobody sent the elevator down for me. I had to climb my corporate ladder on the outside of the building. And a bit like what Elisa said, I was one of the few people of diversity. And I saw my role as I was over code switching, over assimilating. I was becoming somebody that I wasn't, but it crept along. It wasn't an instant change because the culture I was working in was very misogynistic, very alcoholic or addiction led. Lying was a part of your contractual terms. You know, if your client liked to drink, you're in the pub having a drink. That's how the deals were closed. If your manager liked strip clubs, you were hanging out in strip clubs. That was the culture that I was in. I'm not defending it because I made every decision myself. I allowed myself to be influenced by my environment. In 2012, I was at the height of my career. I was doing exceptionally well, but I heard a phrase, and that phrase changed the rest of my life. And the phrase that I heard, and I give full apologies in advance, but it is an abhorrent term, but I won't dilute it because it is my story. The phrase I heard was, it was like seeing a nigger in the woodpile. And when I heard that phrase at a sales meeting on the 55th floor of Canary Wharf, I spun around. I said, who said that? Then once I identified who said it, I said, why did you say that? They said, the charges are hard to see. I said, why don't you say the charges are hard to see? Why did you use that analogy? And something in me fired up. I don't know what it was. I felt like Mount Vesuvius, but I just couldn't let it rest. I wouldn't let it pass me. I lodged a formal grievance. I was told by everybody, drop it. You're not black. It shouldn't affect you. I said, you could be as white as snow and have the IQ of a snowflake and be offended by that statement. My children, God bless them, are 3 amazing kids of caramel color. I want the world to be level and more equitable for them. But I stood my ground. They took the appropriate action and they got the person to read the equality sheet, which back then in 2012 in London was 1 side of A4 paper. That was the action that the HR team took. 8 months later, I walk into work and I get the, Jazz, can you come into the office? So I walked in and they said, oh, we've been looking at one of your files from 7 years ago and we found a discrepancy we're not very happy with. So we're going to suspend you with immediate effect and report you to the Financial Services Authority. I then went for a grievance procedure where somebody was holding a loaded gun. or a smoking gun, and I was dismissed from my employment. I took it to an employment tribunal, and that's when I realized that court's a playground of proof and not truth, because you can prove a lie. I lost the case, and I can reflect that that was the beginning of my 7-year depression, but it felt like I'd lost a leg because all of my life hung onto that washing line of a career. All of my addictions, all of my sort of bills, my kids' education, everything hung off that washing line of a career. It was now in the mud. I fell into a depression, and I opened up 2 bars in London, and to again mask my addiction and my addictive behavior through the guise of it was work. And eventually my wife said she'd had enough. She said, choose the family or choose your lifestyle, but you cannot have both. I made the decision that I wanted to be with my family, and I sold all my interest in the businesses, and I moved on to give my wife all of my assets as in a way of an apology. Once the ink had legally dried, she then kicked me out of the house. So I'm now homeless, sleeping in my car. I spend the next 2 years sleeping in my car. I find a way to survive in that traumatic situation. And what got me through it was I just wanted to see my children. I just wanted to stay around for them. But in 2015, my beloved mother passed away under very vicious circumstances. And the easiest way I can say it is my brother and sister were connected to her passing. What I didn't know was 2 years earlier, my brother and sister took me out of a will. I was the only amendment they made, and it was a £2 million estate. And I had to deal with that, and it was very hard for me to absorb because my mother was the only person that truly loved me. If you see a lot of my LinkedIn posts, I'm always looking up. I'm looking at mum, and she's looking down at me. Her love showers down at me. And I look at her and say, this is who I've become, mother. But in 2018, I couldn't find a way to keep going. When the radar of life swooped over me, nothing bleeped because I was just homeless. Didn't have a job. I didn't have any self-worth. My self-esteem was on the floor. So at the beginning of January 18, I decided that I actually wanted to check out a life, and I was going to drive my car towards a tree. As I headed towards the tree, somebody ran a red light, and I'm involved in a road traffic accident. The police turn up, and I'm arrested for drink driving. I was twice the legal limit. But an hour and a half later, I'm re-arrested for death by dangerous driving. I'm now involved in a fatal road traffic accident. Like that, my brain shut down. It couldn't absorb the information it was hearing. It went into self-preservation mode, and I passed out. It felt like Mike Tyson had punched me from behind. I woke up in the hospital, and I went to give a police interview. And although I was advised to give a no-comment interview, I actually was showing significant signs of remorse, which the sergeant noted at interview. For 15 months, I was released under investigation. They weren't sure whether I was at fault or whether it was him for running a red light, but eventually they said, Jazz, we're going to charge you. And I was charged at the beginning of 2019 with death by dangerous driving. I was sentenced to 8 years imprisonment. I currently sit here talking to you on probation license, despite me being in Tenerife, which I'll explain. And when I was stripped naked in prison, which is what they do when you go into reception, I actually decided that I was going to stand up and be the king my mum gave birth to. I was going to take off as I was stripped naked. I was going to remove this rucksack of trauma that I'd carried all my life. And although trauma is something that's light initially, if you hold on to it forever, just like anything, if you were holding a book in your arm and holding it like that, you hold it for any length of time, your arm's going to start to wobble. You hold it for a year, your arm's going to drop off. So imagine carrying trauma for 40 years, trauma that you'd never actually release because you were suppressing it. You kept suppressing your trauma and you kept depressing it until you actually put armor around your inner essence and your inner child. I wasn't connected with who I was. But I spent 1,093 days in custody with my hand on my chin, wondering how did I end up in prison, a law graduate student. But when I felt worthless in prison, I actually discovered my purpose in prison. I actually discovered my calling in life. My full heritage name is Jaskara, and it means warrior of help. My mother gave me that name at birth. I was here to be of service and contribution to people. I started to help the men who couldn't read and write with their literacy. I used to write letters so that they could communicate with their children and their family and read the letters that came back. I was also the sort of peer support worker. I'd help them out with trying to get their legal visits and their legal rights. I finally got to use my law degree that I've been carrying for nearly 25 years. So I found a purpose, and the more purpose I found in prison and contribution I found, the more I felt a sense of joy in being in prison. I found some lightness, some light in that darkness. And when you're in darkness, when you're in pitch black darkness, a little crack of light can do a lot. It can really illuminate the room. So the more I did it, I actually found to myself that actually there's some system, there's some science to my system. I was in it, lockdown then happened and the whole system shut down. It all ground to a halt. And I wanted to get to a certain prison to start my resettlement journey. We talk about our sentence plan in prison a lot, but I was thinking about my life plan. And one of the things that I was thinking about was what I'm doing right now. I read a book by somebody. That book was written in Pentonville, the prison that I was in. It was written on D wing, which oddly enough was the wing that I was on. But the book was also started on the 5s, which is the 5th floor of that wing, which is where I was reading the book. I'm pretty convinced that the person that wrote the book, who I met today for the first time, actually wrote the book in the cell that I was in. The book helped me. It gave me the framework to take all the emotional charge out of my prison sentence. I got released in April 22. And ever since then, I've been doing one simple thing. I believe that there is a sentence in the English language that doesn't have a full stop, and that's a prison sentence. Because of our stigma, because of our bias towards people that have committed, let's say, a mistake or a criminal offence, we tattoo them for life as actually put them on the scrap heap of talent. There are 12 million people in the UK that have a criminal conviction. I know there's talent in that 12 million people. There are 12,000 people that have an A level or above in prison. But we also know the postcodes that feed our prisons. We know the care schools that are accelerants. 1% of the UK population is care experience, but 30% are in prisons. So we know where our damaged humans, our damaged children, that we criminalize them at a very early age. So I founded a business called Empowerability. And the purpose of the business is very simple. I think everyone has a secret gift to give the world. Let's call it your calling or your purpose. But I think sometimes we need to give people a lift to get them to understand what that is. Because people have told them you're rubbish, you're this, you're that. We've labeled people. And because we've labeled people, it sticks like Velcro and they find it hard to rip off. So I see Empowerability's business is to actually just take off some of the labels and give people that self-belief and hope. Hope is hearing other people's experience, but also Nick used the word fear. I think fear is facing everything and rise. Face everything and rise, not face everything and run. Face it and rise, because once you've got it behind you, you can move on. And so my journey has been traumatic. It's been littered with obstacles, but I always have a mantra of focus on what's on the way, not in the way. Let's look at a long-term strategy to how we're actually going to cope with elements of trauma. But equally, we need to teach our youth, the younger generation, how can we unpick trauma? Because life is traumatic, you know, it is stressful. There will be elements of life that I might find that's light work and somebody else actually, it's a trauma. And what we need to do is educate the children that actually it's okay to have a traumatic experience, but what we shouldn't do is carry it. We're not human camels to carry the burdens of our past and just load them on. We need to release that pressure from the children. And how we can do that is to be living examples of transformation, of people that were resilient, that had the grit to convert themselves. And true transformation means that something has to die, something has to be changed. And I use the analogy of a caterpillar. A caterpillar crawled into prison, but a butterfly left it. It wasn't good news for the caterpillar. Yeah, it wasn't good news for the caterpillar. So when we're looking at trauma, We need to, as I said, we need to not have one lens of this is what trauma is, and my trauma is greater than your trauma, or my journey is more stronger than your journey, or more challenging. We need to accept that everybody can have trauma. Yeah. I speak in all of the prison estates. So I go in, I self-fund myself. I do corporate talks. I overcharge the corporates. Yeah, I tell them I'm overcharging them because the access allows me to run into a prison and do the work that I really want to do. And they can take all the social value benefits from that. But that's the sort of mindset we have. But what we want to do is we want to be working in all of the estate. I talk in the female estate. And when I look at the journey of a woman, that's the first time when I went into a female estate. That was the first time I checked my privilege as a male prisoner. Because I have a lot of privilege naturally in life. And I have to acknowledge that I do carry privilege. I'm sitting here in Tenerife. I'm still serving my prison sentence on probation in the community, but I had to get permission to leave the country. But because of what I did in custody, because of all the work that I did in custody, it's helped me to actually change the paradigm of what community probation looks like, where people can travel overseas to engage in work. But I went into a female prison, and that's the first time I checked my privilege as a male prisoner. When a female prisoner said, you need to come back, and I said, why is that? She said, because I've lost my mother and my daughter in this sentence. Because 80% of the women in prison in the UK have been put there by a man. Either can you hold something, or the man slips something under the bed, the police turn up, or it's domestic violence. The woman finally stands up. She's then put in front of a male judge and gets a stiff sentence. And if there's no family support, the children are then placed into the care system, which is the worst place you can put children, because your environment will always trump your will. When we're looking at trauma, we need to have a trauma lens that's, as I said, multifaceted, intersectionally, looking at it from a much wider vista than what we may carry. And I use the analogy of a phone. If I hold my phone up, what do you see? You see all of my apps and my notifications. And what I see is the back of the phone. Yeah, we're both looking at the same thing, but your angle, your perspective is different. And we have to respect and admire that everybody has a different perspective and a different angle when it comes to trauma, resilience, and grit. I don't want to take up too much of the time. I'm very conscious that I'm hoping that we get some questions. But my name's Jazz Singh. I'm the founder of Empowerability, and I believe that we all have a gift to unleash to the world.
Awesome. Jazz. Thank you so much for sharing your story and for saying yes when I bumped into you in Birmingham. I am so glad now I've actually heard your story properly. Yeah, thank you. And sorry, Jazz.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
Thank you. And without further ado, I am now going to open up the floor for Q&A. And Jazz, put your contact details for Empowerability in the chat as well. So I want to say a huge thank you to Nick Klingon-Smith, who was our first speaker. And if you missed it, oh my goodness, if you missed Nick's talk, please go back and watch it it's on Kashuli UK's Facebook page. It's also on my Facebook as well. I've copied the link across. So please go back and watch it. And also for Drocella, thank you, Drocella, for saying yes and joining us from Tennessee, USA. I think all your links are in the chat. And also we have then Elisa Bogart joining us from Vancouver, Canada. And finally, you've just heard from Jazz Singh joining us from Tenerife while working. So Jazz, again, thank you. I am opening the floor for Q&A now, so don't stand on ceremony. Each of our speakers have shared tremendous resilience, heartache at some points in what they've gone through. So, okay, the floor is officially open. All right.
Hey Carol, I'm trying to put my hand up, but I couldn't. Excuse me for
Okay.
the still in the gym gear. I guess my first question is gonna be for Nick, actually. So Nick, I really appreciate you sharing your story, but also the vulnerabilities, especially as a guy, as a man, whatever. That's often quite the hardest part, you know. I was wondering if you have any advice for people who maybe experienced or gone through what you've gone through when it comes to actually resilience in the heat of the moment, you know, because sometimes resilience is tough at the time. In hindsight, it's something else. I hope that question makes sense, and also that's open to everybody who spoke.
And thank you. And I'm going to kind of feed off of something that Jazz was saying, because it kind of starts to answer that question a little bit. At least I think it does, where we all have our own frame of reference. We're not born with this resilience. I don't believe so. I believe that we can learn it. I don't believe it can be taught. I believe it can be learned. We have to go through it to get through it. We have to experience it. And so if somebody just stubbed their nail for the first time and that was like the most crazy shit they've ever gone through, it's going to affect them in a way that when I get cancer for the fifth time, because I've been banging at it for so long, it's like, so we build up this level of resilience. But when we're at that, if I believe at that moment that you're talking about, the one where, well, you might lose your shit, you feel like you're going to lose, it's intense, your
You got
best
it.
effort, your best effort never feels good in the moment. Like your camera's back off, but it looks like you work out. I mean, you're literally doing your 30th rep of something really heavy at that moment, and it's not going to be pleasant. I'm running an ultra up a mountain. When we build resilience, it's because we're stepping into the suck. It's that red zone. And so how do you do it? You just keep doing it. And then what we begin to do is we get that. It goes like this. You begin to stack the wins, and you begin to remember the wins, because here's a very real thing that I don't know anything about you, but I guarantee you what I'm going to say is true. Okay. Want to know how I know you're going to get through whatever you're going through? Because you got through everything else. Scoreboard. There is no evidence to the contrary. And sometimes you just got to remember that. Now, that's why when I talked about the medals, when Carol pointed that out, 100%. This is this is a virtual picture. I'm in my office right now, but that's the foyer to my door. When I walk in my house, that's what I see. When I walk out the doors, that's what I see. And it's a constant remembrance of all the hard shit that I've gone through and that I've been able to walk out victorious. So beyond that, it's okay that it sucks. Know that it's okay that it sucks. It's part of the process. I hope that helps.
Very much so. Thank you very much.
Drocella?
I want to thank all the presenters. Your stories landed in my heart, and I want to connect. I think it's a journey we are starting together, and we can accomplish more together. Just thank you for your story again. Here in the US, they say that many people who are going into prison, and I like the prison purpose, when you find a purpose. And I did make a comment that I'm a Christian, and I read those stories of St. Paul, and they said he was in prison, and then he wrote all those letters. So they said that the rate of recidivity, like going back to the prison, is high also. So, and I wonder what your community, or how can we support those people who are getting out of the prison so they don't go back? And I want to hear if you are experiencing the same thing. Thank you.
Well, I've got first-hand experience. So I've been at director level for pretty much the last 20 years of my life. But about a year ago, literally a year ago tomorrow, actually, I was in a position where I'd lost a job. I was an IT director when I was in prison, and I recruited men to come out and work with me. But I joined a charity. So you can seduce me with my remorse, yeah, or you can seduce me with purpose, because they're the same thing to me. My remorse fuels my purpose. My purpose is my remorse. And somebody very articulately seduced me and says, "Oh, look, we're going to go and save the world, and you can be part of the journey." So I made a financial decision, to reduce my income by £50,000. Now I was in a privileged position to do that, but I literally halved my income, joined this charity, ran a project. It was amazing. We had a lot of impact. But as soon as the project finished, I was told that I was surplus to requirements. I wasn't needed, and they couldn't afford to pay me that month. So my contract was terminated. So I then found myself over 50 with a criminal conviction, serving in the community, my probation license, trying to get a job. And I went from director level in 1 month down to caseworker. I've got nothing against caseworkers. I started as a caseworker. I was being interviewed by people and I was looking at them going, I've got t-shirts older than you. As soon as I told them that I had a criminal conviction, they just collapsed and went, oh my gosh, like you're that person you were 6 years ago. And my answer was, are you the same person you were 6 years ago? I've stopped drinking. I haven't taken drugs. I'm 6 years into my recovery journey. I'm the best version I've ever been. I'm being invited to talk at conferences overseas. That was never happening before. Because what we do, we have this very, I call it the Caravaggio effect. You know the story of Caravaggio, the painter. He was as good as Michelangelo, but he was always seen to be lower because he loved to drink, loved women, loved gambling, got into fights. And in his lifetime, he killed 4 people. And back then, the punishment was you were kicked out of the town that you lived in or the city that you were in. So he got kicked out of Milan, where he was born, went down to Rome, got kicked out of there by the Pope, ended up in Naples, then got kicked out of there and went to Malta with the Knights of the Templar, and then ended up killing one of them, and then got kicked, had to leave Malta pretty quickly, and got back to Naples, and he drew a painting called David and Goliath. And there's a picture of David holding Goliath's head. But David's not victorious, he's not happy, he's not joyous. He's actually quite somber and quite introspective, self-reflective. And on closer inspection, you actually can see that the ogre that David is holding is a self-portrait of Caravaggio. And he's saying to the Pope, take my head in mercy. But I had an innocence that was lost. And a lot of people, a lot of the postcodes that people come from, the paddocks they come from, they have no alternative because they're raised by single parents. Structurally, the father is taken out and put into prison or, is removed from the family. They're growing up in single family, so that the streets, the gang culture becomes their family because they have a sense of belonging. So when we see people with criminal convictions, we need to lift the bonnet on who they were at that time, but also identify who they are today. What inner work have they done? What sort of recovery, restorative work have they put out there? Because as you said, the Bible is full of stories of people going in and out of prison. Jesus was crucified because they said he was a criminal. So, the Bible, we've got Nelson Mandela as an iconic prisoner that went on to do amazing things once he left prison, but he was actually a convicted terrorist for 27 years. So we have to do the rehabilitation, the rehabilitation wheel. We are part of it is not down to the criminal justice system. We are part of it. And we have a responsibility to make sure that whenever we talk about returning citizens, that we actually say, no, I'm happy to have somebody sit next to me that's done that inner work and prove their risk assessed to be safe in the community.
Awesome. Thank you, Jazz. Thank you.
If I can comment for Jazz, it hit me something you said earlier about just the initial stigma. And I'm just going to be honest, I felt one as you were telling your story. And I remembered the only difference between you and I is someone didn't red on red light the 1,000 times I drive home drunk.
Yeah.
And that's, given in severity of different things, but that's it. So that stigma went away real quick. And I wonder how many other people would feel the same way if they actually just put themselves in someone else's shoes for a minute. And it's not like it's not like you didn't do something wrong. Not like I didn't do it wrong 1,000 times over either.
Nick, what you just said there is so brutally honest. I've probably been drug driving for a lot longer than my accident. Yeah. It's just part of the course. We kind of think it's acceptable. We get home. If I did it once, it's acceptable. It's unacceptable.
It's actually just crazy the amount of effort I made not to do it, and then yet how many nights I'm like, all right, let's go. And you forget, it's the most selfish act because of that. And it's not like you set out to do harm.
Absolutely. And as I say to people, now with Uber, the way we've got modern technology, if somebody says to me, I'll drive you, I said, you've had a drink, so I'm not getting in the car. You can drive, but I will not be in the car. And that's where we have to stand up, because it is but the grace of all the gods that we don't have more collisions when people are driving home after a night out.
Well, anyways, you hit me.
Awesome. Okay. Who's next?
If there's no other questions, Carol, I've got another one, if you don't mind.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Go for it,
This
Jack.
is, again, forgive the camera. This is specifically for Drocella. Drocella, here in the UK, I work for an organization that essentially helps like investment and growth for businesses, but specifically, part of my job, I actively make an effort to support immigrant communities, and in our city, there's a high level of refugees, specifically from Africa and Asia in our cases. My question is this: I know from your background and doing a quick Google, you've came to America. Essentially, you've made a massive impact and you've achieved a lot. My question is this: would you have any advice for how to essentially approach people who maybe are new to the country, to help them fit in quicker, to help them achieve what they're trying to achieve, and if there's any considerations to make? The reason I ask this is because sometimes people come with these challenges. I think it takes time to overcome them and also adapt to like new things, like new culture and language.
That is a good question. And I think it ties also to my values as the diversity trust builder. My 3 values are trust, community, and championship. And I will start with trust. And I served as executive director for the agency that welcomed me, Bridge Refugee Services, for 6.5 years. And sometimes people are rushing to put too much information, to give too much information, and the pressure on the newcomers. And I was telling the case managers, no matter the government expectations, take these people as human beings who went through a lot of the trauma, and then make listening your friend. So make listening your friend first. Give them time. Listen to them. Listen to their stories. What they lost. What are the losses? What are the aspirations? So start that conversation to build that trust. And when the trust is there, they will go quick like this. But I think when you build the trust, you build a better understanding from where they come, the aspiration, and then the fears they have. Because now I'm sharing my story, but I didn't trust nobody at the very beginning. I didn't share my story at all because I was considering everybody as a betrayer. I did not know who to trust because of the condition I came from. So listening to these people and they give them different options. Like here in America, you go there and they say, it's up to you. The system in Africa is different from America. How it's up to you? I do tell people, give them options. It's like when I was like doing the paperwork as a new employees, I didn't have any like guidance. They were telling it's up to you, but it was a new system. They have to learn a way of simplifying the method and then conveying the method. And also, and I'm writing a book, 12 Secrets to Integration for a New Country. It's like helping them to understand, but also to connect them to the community as soon as possible. I always say that the 3 pillars of refugee integration is learning the language, getting engaged in the community if you can, and being employed, or building your business if you are a business person and you know the language and you can find resources and you can go quicker. But listening, I think, is something that is missing, and then giving different options, and also learning about their culture. Because sometimes they tell you in America, you have to look into the eyes of the person who does interview. In some cultures, it's disrespect. So you have to learn about do's and don'ts so you can have that conversation. Maybe this is something also you can ask when you are listening and learning from their culture before going into pulling them of government regulations, what they have to do in this and this and this. If I had power, Also, I will let these people having 1 month that to try to figure out who they are, where they are, and what is waiting for them. Because I think we are rushing the process without listening and landing into the heart of those newcomers. So, and I would like to have more conversation with you, Jeff. And that is a good question. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Drocella.
You're muted, Carol.
Sorry, Selena, I said I almost missed your hand there. Go for it.
Yeah, I mean, every one of the speakers were really touching, like the heart of my life. Being a refugee myself, for now maybe more than 20 years in the UK, having, lost my job, and because I had been sick, I had cancer. I couldn't go back to my job because they said, "Why did you want to write a book?" So I was fired on the spot. Everything I had invested in that job was thrown to the dog. And so it was just like a matter of resilience to survive. And then being beaten with the double pneumonia last year. I mean, it's just sometimes you think it never stops, but it pours. But the stories I've heard here, oh my goodness, I thought my cases were worse, but you guys are so powerful. And yeah, I mean, I can't remember the names of the two gentlemen. Both your stories are quite amazing. I know how it feels to lose your family, to lose your home. As a divorcee, I didn't have anywhere to go when my kids were small. And all I wanted was to be with my kids. So to be where I am now is because I had those kids that they never asked to be born. It was my choice. I mean, I was thinking, okay, I can be a storyteller of any subject and it can go well. And, so it's like sometimes you look at people, you look at yourself, you think, what really can I help people with? It's just so amazing to come and hear lots and lots of stories and thinking, yes, I'm a speaker, but do I speak up? No, I don't. I'm not really going for it and helping other people, which is something I've been trying to do for years now. I think because of some rejection which happened into my life when I tried to do coaching and be a speaker, I paid me lots of money being trained. Yes, I trained, but it didn't finish. But you guys have inspired me. Thank you so much. It's really amazing. And sometimes when you feel like you really need some inspiration, somebody to kick your butt. And you guys, that's what you did to me today. I was crying with some of the stories because, they sound so unreal. But because I went through a lot of them, I know they're real. So kudos to you guys. Let's connect as well on those who are on LinkedIn, Facebook. It's Selena Cheshire. Thank you so much.
Again, speaking muted. Thank you, Selena. Oh, you're wonderful. Never give up. Never give up. Okay, so any more questions? We have 4 minutes left. This is the time to get them in. I mean, I am just so inspired by every story I've heard. Elisa, Lucy, thank you. Go for it, Lucy.
Hi, my name's Lisa. Thank you everyone for just sharing. My question's really for Jazz. You said something that really stuck with me. You said that your environment always trumps your will. And I just wanted to ask you if you could give advice to somebody who's in a really bad environment and they're not able to immediately change that environment. What would be the one thing that you would say to that person to lean into so that they don't lose the will?
All change is incremental. It's not like we're pulling a light switch and the light switch comes on. The analogy of your environment trumps your will. If you hang around 10 people that go to the gym, you end up lifting weights. You hang around 10 people that read books, you've got your nose in a book. You hang around 10 people that take drugs, you're the 11th addict. You hang around 10 people that go to partying and raves, you're the 11th person that's on drugs or drinking too much. Peer pressure is, a real thing. It's a real energy. And we have something called FOMO, fear of missing out. And that's really linked to low self-esteem. What you have to do is be comfortable spending time alone. And to do that, you've got to make some tough decisions. I think everybody's story of resilience or how they overcame trauma, it was they had to do something called the inside job. It's inner work. You have to make yourself more resilient inside for you to have more sort of resistance from the outside. So small steps, you're not going to climb any mountain or summit any mountain of success in 2 or 3 steps. It's lots of incremental steps. And sometimes the path isn't straight up. Sometimes you have to go left or right and you have to plot your course. But as long as you feel you're making progress, and to do that, you've got to make some sacrifices. Change is not easy or simple. It is an uncomfortable process. But that's where the beautiful growth lies. It doesn't lie, you can be a king or queen in your comfort zone and talk about changing the mind, but you've got to talk about it in your gut and in all your actions. So I hope that helps.
Yeah, thank you so much. I was just asking because in my day-to-day job, I run a food pantry and I always see people that are really marginalized. So I come across many people from different walks of life and I know that they can't immediately change the circumstances that they're in. But thank you so much just for mentioning that obviously change is incremental and it's an inside job. That's the one thing that I'm taking away from this. Thank you.
Awesome, Lisa. Thank you. Drocella.
Thank you for all the comments. And I wanted to add something to the question Jeff asks, because there are traditional, like case management things, program they have for the refugees and immigrants. I think we have to find non-traditional coaching, for example, including coaching in mentorship, in what you can offer to those newcomers. And I think hiring a coach or a mentor, Lisa, confidence. I think they have many limiting beliefs. They can count, I don't speak the language, I don't do this, my parents didn't do this, I did. So they have a lot of things and voices in their minds, but hiring somebody, including in your budget, not only staff and board development, but also empowerment for the refugees and immigrants, and then hire extra people who will coach the case managers, but also who build the program for the refugees and immigrants themselves. And also, if people have a business background, and I'm trying hard now to work with UNHCR and other organizations, how do you prepare them before they arrive in the countries of resettlement? Because many spend a lot of years, 20 years in the refugee camp, waiting for the food, no training, nothing. So even getting acclimated in new housing environment, while you didn't live in a house, it's difficult. So if we can see how the pre-arrival services can be enhanced, so even the learning the language, this is something I'm fighting for with the UNHCR or other partners, but I wanted to talk about this training and capacity building for those newcomers, which is non-traditional about compared to what they are offering in those organizations. Thank you.
Hope that helped, Jack.
Very, very much so. I think also the previous answer of listening, because I feel like as was observed, a lot of the problems people face are just a matter of kind of understanding them, if that makes sense, and understand them as a person to help solve them, rather than having like the one size fits all, you know.
Yeah.
But yeah, thank you very much.
Awesome.
And also I wanted to say this because when I came as a refugee, like the agency didn't have options. So they had like two employers. You had to be a housekeeper or going to work at Goodwill Industry. I like those things, but you have to build the relationships with employers, with businesses. So you have many people who will say, hey, if you are a pharmacist, for example, and you cannot transfer your degree, but if you work in a pharmacy in an entry-level position, it's different from going to work in somewhere else. I think we have to bring humanism in those social work. We are talking about human resources, humanism in human resources, because sometimes you just have like, as you say, Jeff, you have like one medicine for everybody. But when I was talking about building relationships, you have to have staff members also who value the relationships and partnerships.
Awesome. Awesome, awesome, awesome. Let me just say, please go in and save the chat before you leave. I've just saved it myself. There's some valuable links in there. And I thank you. Nick, when is your fundraising event?
All month long.
All month long, this month?
Yep.
October. Okay.
All month long.
So if you tell us again, Nick, what you're fundraising for.
I'm fundraising for the American Cancer Society for breast cancer awareness. The campaign is called Men Wear Pink. And so that's why I'm wearing pink. And I actually did not own any pink. And nice. So I put it out on LinkedIn a little while ago for various businesses and people who could donate pink shirts. And so another speaker friend of mine, Tara, actually made this for me. So that's what, and I've got a couple more that I'll be rocking all month as I do. I'll be wearing pink in all my any video that I wear a shirt, since most of my videos are post workout and I'm not wearing a shirt, but I'll be any workout that I am, any day that I am wearing a shirt, it'll be pink.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you for your support.
Thank you.
So Nick's link is actually in the chat if you would like to donate to that fundraising. So please save the chat. There are other links there as well. Elisa's, once she's be hosting podcasts and would like some of you on there. So yes, thank you, Elisa. And yes,
I just started mine. Did my my fundraising for how do you call it, Richie? It's the Macmillan Cancer Research.
Cancer research.
Yeah, Macmillan Cancer Support. So I did a live event on Saturday, and I'm still looking for donations, fundraising as well. So well done, Jeff. Thank you.
oh, awesome, well done.
So just on the nails, before we go, I paint my nails with love over fear. You can see that.
Yes.
And I do that every 3 months for men's mental health awareness. We're 12 heterosexual men, we're called Hard as Nails. And we paint this so it's a conversation starter. When people say, why have you painted your nails? We say, let's talk about men's mental health, because we don't talk about it enough.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely, Jazz.
That's amazing.
And also, I am inviting you to join us. We have I'm part of the G100 global community, and we'll have Values and Volunteerism Global Conference on October 11th and 12th, and I'll be speaking on the 12th. I did put the link in the chat, and you can find information on LinkedIn as well, because even Jeff, volunteers, without volunteers, I tell you, the refugee program can be dead,
100%,
because they rely on the volunteers heavily. Mm.
Is it the conference? Is it online?
It's online, yes.
Oh,
And
okay.
I did put the link in the chat.
Yeah, I
Yes.
saw that. Thank you.
Mm.
Guys, I've got to go and get some dinner.
Yes, we're going to
Are
be
you-
shutting
Are
up shop
you
now.
on LinkedIn, Drocella?
Yes, yes, I am. Let us connect. Yeah.
Yeah,
Mm.
Selena Cheshire.
All
Okay.
right. Before
Thank you.
Jazz signs out, heartfelt thanks on behalf of Ritu and myself to our speakers. Jazz, thank you. Elisa, thank you. Drocella, thank you. And Nick, thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I'm sure everyone who has been a party to this stories from both sides have been inspired, and never give up. Look inside first. Get the strength from inside. I'm a woman of faith, so yeah, I know where my strength comes from. Alrighty, take good care, and thank you everyone, Florida, Miriam, Lisa, Jack, JFK, for joining us. And if you want to go back and watch this, go on our Facebook page where it has been live streamed. You can see it from the beginning. All right, it will at some point be uploaded to our YouTube channel, Kushulia UK YouTube channel. But in the meantime, as we are drawing towards the weekend, have an amazing and blessed and fruitful weekend. Take good care.
All the best, guys.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Feel better, Ritu.
Bye-bye.
Yes.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Ah.